Hello, today we're going to be talking about the unit rationale for the interdisciplinary unit plan, and we did climate change. So to begin, we're going to be talking about like our big ideas for the lesson, what we thought is the best idea to go about talking about climate change. So first, we're going to kind of talk about geography. You can see in the top right corner here, there's just the average temperature and see how students can see the difference from maybe a couple years ago and then what scientists prove for the future. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to kind of talk about how the international community gets together and talks about these issues, especially right now. We're the two major groups when you're thinking about climate change and who needs stuff to be done is the United States and China, and just how what goes on with dealing with these issues and what we can do better and how the international community solves this stuff. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about um, the environment. So stuff like droughts that cause farms to be unable to grow any produce, and then how population has increased throughout the recent time more rapidly than normal, and how that can lead to more dire situations when dealing with climate change and the amount of pollution that goes into our environment. So, next, we're going to say how we're going to understand these big ideas. So, first, we're going to try to get multiple perspectives. When we're talking about the global and international community, we can get a bunch of different ideas, such as perspectives from NGOs, non governmental organizations, um, governments, such as the United States and China and Russia, some superpowers, and then other organizations like that, and then as well as the media, because the media is one of the most important things when we're talking about the social media era, where they can just spew this facts and knowledge, and people uh, assess them to be true, but when in reality they can be false or just a little absent and biased of the truth. And then we're just going to be using maps and other types of tools and media to convey the message of where is global warming happening, like what's causing it, and who's the most likely to be hurt by these changes in our world. So, some predictable misunderstandings that we feel like we can encounter is the first one is weather and climate. So, something that we talked about is how weather and climate can be talked about in someone's life. So, you can have a great job, have a great life, great family, everything's going really well, but you just have one bad day or a bad week, and that's kind of like the weather. That one bad day or bad week, it can change within minutes. You can get great news, and you get bad news, and it just changes. Climb would be the whole, your whole lifespan, which is what we're kind of worried about. Whether students will can actually understand those ideas. So, like, bring it into those contexts of some shared experience, get into their funds of knowledge of maybe they've had a bad day. So that's kind of like the weather, but maybe this whole year's been going on good and well, and they're getting good grades and stuff. So that's the climate. Another thing we were going to talk about is how the social media distorts stuff because, like I said previously, the whenever someone sees something on Twitter or Instagram, they automatically assume it to be true without any bias, no misinformation being there. So we're gonna have to get the idea in the student's head that maybe not everything that you see on the news is actually true. So Trump might have been onto something when he said fake news. So yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about that, and then finally we're gonna talk about how people how the same amount of people get the 99% of scientists believe climate change is a real thing, an issue, but the only 1% doesn't, and they still get the same amount of media time and the same ideas of, well, yeah, this is true. Which, I mean, if 99% of people believe something, it's probably not true. So, like, going back to how the media can distort different things about important events. The knowledge, skills, and that students need to develop are going to be debating. So our summative essay is a mock UN. So that's going to be important for students to be able to get their research done on good websites, and then being able to relay that information correctly and skillfully. Um, some identifying and comparing different organizations is another important skill. So, like different NGOs, what they believe, what they do to improve or improve their case in the world of climate change. And then, lastly, we're going to talk about civic engagement and how grassroots uh, startups can actually have a huge importance on certain matters. When we talk about can one person really change a democracy, you can if you have enough people willing to follow your lead. How are we going to scaffold the knowledge to develop higher levels of thinking? So we're just going to do through intro lessons and how we set up our unit lesson plan. There's a bunch of stuff that we can do. We're starting off with the easier topics and just the big main ideas, and then we're going to go deeper into those things, such as media bias and organizations. But we're first going to begin with just the very basic knowledge. So as we get deeper into the plan, we don't have to um, allow so much scaffolding, and students can just think at a higher level themselves. Our assessments, to begin, our assessments are pretty simple. We think that exit slips are some of the most important and useful things that teachers can use, just because it gives you instant feedback right away. It doesn't have to be graded necessarily, because that's a lot of grading, but just like briefly going through the students' responses and them to be able to understand exactly what they learned through the lesson, and seeing if we may need to scaffold a little more for future lessons. Next, we were going to do a brief graphic organizer, which I think is extremely important, especially in social studies, because in social studies and essays, and especially for the summative assessment, where it's going to be a mock UN, where they can get their main ideas and what they're going to try to talk about and put it into a organized fashion. And that's where graphic organizers really help the cause of these things. And then lastly, the mock UN, which shows students they're able to get different perspectives, because they're not all going to be from the United States. They're not all going to have the same perspective that they might already have in their own mindset. So if they believe in climate change, but they're gonna be China in the mock UN, they're gonna have to go against their ideals. And I think that's going to be really useful for students to see different perspectives and understand why they might think this, and then that also improves their own argument in their own life, where they can agree with themselves, I guess, a little more. So yeah, I think this was a really cool assignment. I think that climate change isn't necessarily talked about enough in the classroom, and social studies you wouldn't really expect to be able to, but there's so many different things that you can do to allow students to get a better idea of the world around them. Thank you.